If you're thinking about buying a home in Salem, Oregon, here is the one mistake I don't want you to make, and that is falling in love with the home before you really have a good understanding of what you're about to buy. Because when you search for homes in Salem, Oregon, it doesn't tell you the full picture because there's a lot of nuances that will not be exposed when you look up listings on Zillow, Realtor.com, or Redfin, or whatever other sites that you like to use to search for homes in Salem, Oregon. You can have a Salem address without actually being inside the city of Salem. A house can look perfect until you realize it's sitting right next to one of Salem's major traffic corridors. And one of the biggest mistakes I see people make when they're moving here is looking at what's around the house today instead of asking what's going to be around it 5 or even 10 years from now. I'm going to walk you through 5 things that you should absolutely know before buying a home here in Salem, and the 5th one especially is something you're not going to find on Zillow. I relocated to Salem, Oregon, just like you're thinking about doing, and I've helped many clients do the same, and these are the things that I would absolutely look for if I were buying a home today in Salem and that I guide my clients on as well. So let's start off with something simple, but could actually be quite confusing because you may think you know where you're buying, but you actually don't. This is one of the first things that I would check before I got emotionally connected to a home, and that is to see if the home is actually within the city limits of Salem, Oregon, because you could have a Salem mailing address and still not actually be inside the city limits. Now, for some people, this may not make a huge difference, but for others, it could be quite important. And this is a distinction that most people who are relocating from out of the city, out of the state, don't have a really good understanding of. And it's something that I didn't even think about before relocating here with my family. And that is when you pull up a map of Salem, there is a distinct outline of the city. And then there's these other areas that are adjacent to the city but look like they're part of the city and they're not. And these are the unincorporated areas of Salem, Oregon. And if you're not really zooming in, paying attention, you could actually be buying a house that is outside the boundaries of the city of Salem, Oregon. And of course, whenever they decided these boundaries, they didn't make it easy for the average consumer or the average person looking at a map because it's not simple lines. They jag inside and out and they run diagonal and they run all sorts of weird directions. You can't even just say, oh, if you're on this street, you're outside, and you're in this street, you're inside the city, because sometimes half the street or sometimes your neighbors across the street may be inside the city, but you are not. So you really need to focus in and pay attention to where these border lines are. Now, where this matters will really kind of depend on how you feel about the type of services you get and maybe how civic-minded you are. Now, let's start off with the city services. So if you are in the unincorporated areas of Salem, you will be dealing a lot with the county services, not the city services. And there could be some overlap here, specifically when you're talking about police and fire. Police, you're going to be dealing with the sheriffs in the county or sometimes even the state police. You're not going to be really involved with the city policing. Now, of course, there is some overlapping in emergency cases, but if you ever make a call to some sort of policing agency, it's going to be to the county sheriffs. Also, when it comes to building and planning, if you were going to remodel your home, add some square footage, again, you'd be dealing with the county instead of the city. It's also important that you check to see if that home in the unincorporated areas of Salem are connected to the city of Salem utility services like water and sewer, because sometimes they are not. You may be on a well or a septic tank system or some other type of system entirely with a different incorporation or company or a private company servicing those areas, or maybe even community well service. So these are something, again, that could affect your day-to-day life. And when it comes to electricity and trash, that's a little bit different. Those are a little bit more generalized, and there's not a huge distinction of whether you are in the city or in the unincorporated areas. The other thing to think about is you may not be able to take advantage of the library services and other services that are dedicated to the residents of the actual city of Salem, not the unincorporated residents outside of the city of Salem. Now, there is a benefit to living outside because in general, your property taxes are going to be a little bit lower because you're not paying into some of these city services, but then you are also not reaping the rewards or the benefits from those types of services. For instance, if you wanted to go to the library, you actually have to get a membership if you're not living within the city of Salem. So little things like that. The other thing to think about is, depending on how civic minded you are and how involved you want to be with local politics, you will, if you live in the unincorporated areas of Salem, you will not be voting for the mayor of Salem, the city council members of Salem. You may not have a voice in some of the propositions or some of the things that are happening within the city, yet they would still affect your day-to-day life, because even though you are living in the unincorporated area of Salem, you're going to be spending a lot of time within the city limits itself. So if you want to have a say in city government, if that's important to you, then you're going to want to make sure that you live within the city boundaries. Now, if that's not something as important and you want to save a little bit on property taxes, then being in the unincorporated areas is just fine. Now, as time goes on, some of these unincorporated areas do get swallowed up by the city. They redraw the boundaries, but it is quite a lengthy process, and there's time and money involved with that, and I would not count on that. The area specifically that you need to be aware of is going to be the Four Corners area and kind of the southeastern portion of Salem, and the Hayesville district, which is in the northeastern portions of Salem. And then, of course, there's more obvious areas out in the rural parts of outside the city of Salem, more in the kind of the farmland or in the outskirts of the city. That's a little bit more obvious or understandable that you're not necessarily within the city boundaries. But there are places, again, like the Four Corners area in Hayesville, where you really got to be careful and really look at the lines to see if that house is within the city limits. So as you are looking at houses and you're pulling up addresses on Google, it's really important that you just don't assume you're in the city of Salem just because the mailing address has the city of Salem as part of it. You really got to look at those boundaries. There are maps that I share that you can easily find through the city of Salem to really hone in and figure out whether that home is within the city limits or not. But now, knowing where that property technically sits, whether inside or outside the boundaries, now you got to figure out if that house is in the right location within the right neighborhood for you. Because again, when you pull up neighborhoods, there's this generalization like, oh, this is the neighborhood for me. But now you really got to determine whether the location within the neighborhood is going to be the best fit, because that's where a lot of people get caught off guard and sometimes surprised when they roll up to the house after seeing it online and realizing, oh, that's not the right spot. And if you are watching this video because you are thinking about relocating to Salem, buying a house, this is exactly why I do these videos. This is the stuff that I help my clients with. I'm a local real estate agent, just like you. I'm not a local to Salem. I relocated here with my family, so I have a great understanding of some of the things that you may be concerned about and a lot of the questions that you may have. So if you are thinking about doing that move, buying a home, make sure you hit me up at the contact information popping up right about now or in the description. And now we're going to talk about location, and not in the general sense of, hey, what's the right neighborhood for you? Because you could pick the right neighborhood for yourself and still pick the wrong location for the specific home that you're looking to buy. One of the hardest parts about relocating to Salem, Oregon is making sure you're finding the right home in the right neighborhood, and that true combination is the key to any happy purchase for any home buyer. And it was for my family, because when we ended up choosing the neighborhood, we ended up living in West Salem. It was the right fit for us. It still didn't mean that anywhere in West Salem was going to be a good connection, because when my family and I figured out what was going to be the right neighborhood for us, finding the right location within that neighborhood was a little bit trickier than we anticipated. For example, we specifically wanted to live in West Salem in the hillside neighborhoods, but we wanted a flat lot. That combination is not easy to come by. We ended up finding it, but those are the types of nuances that I'm talking about. Even though you've discovered, hey, this neighborhood is going to be the right fit for my lifestyle, what I'm looking to do, it's close to the amenities I want, commute time is great, everything about it feels good. Then you find a home online and it's in that neighborhood, and you realize, and you're thinking, okay, that's going to be a good fit. And I'd say, hold on, not necessarily, because there's a lot of other considerations that you need to take in before making that decision of whether that home is right for you. Now, I gave you that first example of, hey, you're looking for a home, maybe you want a flat lot, but you're looking in West Salem and you're realizing most of these homes have hillside sloping lots, and you're not understanding of what that actually means as far as your day-to-day living within that house and on that property. Now, let's say you found a neighborhood that really fits the vibe that you're looking for. It has that quintessential Pacific Northwest feel, and you find a home that looks perfect, and then you realize you have large fir trees or pine trees surrounding you, and that cuts off all of the sunlight. And again, we sometimes get a little sunlight during about half the year, and could make a difference on how that home actually feels once you see it in person. And other things to think about is, if this neighborhood is surrounded by these trees, sometimes they can be affected by heavy winds or the occasional ice storm that we get here that could lead to damaged trees, falling trees, or dying trees, which could effectively impact your property and have other major negative issues. Now, I'm not just saying this to scare you about beautiful trees here in Salem, Oregon. It's one of the reasons why we moved here. We love the nature. But again, these are little things that you may not necessarily be thinking about coming from outside of Salem, and not maybe having an understanding of how that could impact not just your insurance or potentially damaging your home, but just the overall feel. If all of those trees are in the neighborhood blocking out sunlight, that can make a real big difference on your mood and how you feel ultimately about your move here to Salem. One of the biggest things that comes up for me when I'm helping my clients moving from out of town is they fall in love with the house, not understanding that it's either on or right adjacent to a cut-through street for that neighborhood. There's a lot of neighborhoods in Salem that are really peaceful, quiet, you feel away from it all, not a lot of cut-through traffic. But then there's a lot of great neighborhoods that have these smaller arteries. They're not the main roads in Salem, but people use them to cut from one main road to another, or it's used in that neighborhood to go in and out of that particular neighborhood. So if you're living on one of these streets, it could be a lot busier, and it really kind of may take away from that vibe that you want when moving to Salem, Oregon. Now, again, this may or may not have a huge impact on you. Some people don't necessarily care. They actually like the convenience of it all, and it really doesn't affect them as much as others. But it's something, again, things that you need to be aware about, that not only do you need to look at the neighborhood, but the kind of the micro nuances within the neighborhood itself. And this leads me to another quirk that we have here in Salem, Oregon, or at least something that I wasn't used to and a lot of my clients aren't used to, is a lot of our streets have dead ends, and they're like cul-de-sacs sort of, but they're longer streets. You know, there's maybe 15, 20 homes on each street, and it just goes to a dead end. But that street is coming off kind of one of those busier streets that I'd mentioned to you that connects the whole neighborhood. So you've got all of these lined up in a row. You've got a main street that's going through the neighborhood, and then you have these branches that cut off each of those, that branch off of that main street, but they're all dead end streets. So if you're buying on one of those streets, you may not necessarily feel connected to a neighborhood, even though you are in a neighborhood. And that is something that, again, you may not get a feel for unless you're seeing that or viewing that in person. And it's hard to get that information online. You see a really cool home on a nice street, but you're realizing it's not really connected to other streets. So if you're someone that likes to take a walk around the neighborhood with your dog, yourself, family, kids out on bikes, it may just not have that feeling or that same feel that you would have if you were in a more traditional type of neighborhood. And again, not saying that that's good or bad. It's just something that there's certain preferences that people have. So something that you should be aware of, again, within the neighborhood that you're choosing. And now we're going to do something a little bit more full circle, and we're going to talk about these hillside neighborhoods because there are plenty of them in Salem, Oregon. You may like the idea of it because of the views and maybe some of the privacy you get with that. But again, it does have an effect on your lifestyle. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to teach your kid how to ride a bike if all the streets are hilly, or even just once they know how to ride a bike, it's hard to go up and down those hills when you're a young kid. Even as an adult, it's a lot of work riding on those hillside streets. Parking sometimes is a pain. You could be on a 45-degree angle. Again, that may be something you don't care about. It may be something you do care about. So when you're looking at neighborhoods, it may really look cool online, but certain details that you're going to be aware of for the specific home that you're looking to purchase. So when you do find that home, it's important to look not just at the home and its property lines, but maybe with what's within 500 feet or so of that property. And going with the theme of what's around your property, I think that's where a lot of people underestimate this next topic, and that is, what are some of the streets that are connecting to or surrounding the home and the neighborhood that you've chosen as your next home here in Salem, Oregon? Now, of course, the overall neighborhood matters, and even the micro location matters, as we talked about. But what also can impact your day-to-day living and how you feel about your move here is having a better understanding of the larger roads that connect these neighborhoods and that connect you to the rest of the city of Salem, because that could ultimately change the vibe and how you feel about your home purchase. Now, I'm sure as you've done a lot of your research looking at homes and neighborhoods, you've come across some of the major streets that connect Salem, like Commercial Street, Liberty Street, Kubler, Mission, State, Lancaster Road, River Road, Wallace, Edgewater, Mission, and more. Now, of course, I just rambled off a bunch of street names that may or may not mean much to you, but they will absolutely impact and be a part of your daily life. And why this matters is because now Salem is a town of 170,000 people. It takes you about 30 minutes to cross from one side to the other. It's a little bit spread out, but these are some of the streets that you will be taking very frequently, and you're going to want to know its traffic patterns and noise levels and how it's going to impact whether you hear it from the house that you're looking to purchase, or if you're going to be impacted by the backup and the traffic that sometimes can occur, or if people are using cut-through streets to get to these other major streets. Either way, it's good to know what you're getting involved with as far as being or living close to these major streets. So when you see the home online, sometimes we're not connecting the dots of the distance between that house and some of these major streets, and whether you're going to hear some of that traffic noise or just kind of this general hum in the background. Now, again, for a lot of people, this may or may not make a big difference. I know I lived in a house that was closer to a major street, and there's this background hum of a noise that basically just became white noise, didn't really mean much to me. But for a lot of other people, it's a little bit more sensitive. So these are things that you're going to want to be aware about when especially purchasing a home near some of those major streets that I had just listed at the beginning of this section. And I highly recommend when you're looking at homes to make sure you go to that home different times of the day, because the sound from some of these major streets and the traffic patterns from some of these major streets will vary depending on whether you're looking at the morning, in the middle of the day, or the afternoon. And because you're going to be using some of these streets so frequently, it's good to get to know them to see how it's going to affect your own personal commute. How are you going to get around town, to whether to your job, to amenities, to your entertainment, or just getting across town. There have been plenty of times where I'm taking my clients out on tours and the traffic patterns seem a little bit light and they're very happy with it, and then I give them a little bit dose of reality and say, hey, come back around 5 o'clock in the evening, or the next day come back around 8 in the morning, and you're going to see a little bit, it's going to have a different feel. Parents are taking their kids to school, rushing to work, same thing when coming home. We don't have a tremendous amount of traffic here in Salem. I just want to kind of set that record straight. But you do have certain times of the day where it can get backed up a little bit more. So then they would come back during those times and they would see how that would kind of feel a little bit different going in and out of the neighborhoods. And again, this is maybe a smaller or minor issue, but for some people, it is a major issue. Now, the next topic we're going to jump into really catches people off guard. If your due diligence and research is not done correctly, you could be ending up making a big mistake or buying a home that's going to be heavily impacted by something coming on into the future. Now, this next topic really hits home for me. Thankfully, I did my due diligence, so I'm aware of what's going on in and around the neighborhood that I purchased in, but a lot of people aren't, and it could catch people by surprise. And there's a lot of open space here in Salem, and that's really appealing for a lot of people because it doesn't feel like you're living in a big city by any means. It doesn't even feel like you're living in a mid-sized city, just the amount of open space and land that we have here. But that could be deceiving because there's a lot of growth happening here in Salem, a lot of building, commercial and residential, and it's happening more and more in areas that you may not necessarily think it's going to happen. And that is in these more rural farmland areas. You've got these vast open plots of land that look beautiful, but what's really hiding is that some developer bought it and there are major significant plans to build on that property. And that's happening all throughout Salem. I'll give you a specific example. I bought a house in a neighborhood that was kind of this newly constructed neighborhood. Behind us, beautiful open space, there's farmland. And I did a little bit of research before we bought the house, and I did discover that open space could go away. Now, our views will probably be okay, but just having that spatial feeling, that feeling that no one's behind you, that could go away. And that's because the developer has bought the property. There's no plans. They've owned the land for well over 5-6 years now and haven't really done much with it. But it's there, and we know that that possibility is going to happen. We bought the home anyway, knowing that that was the potentially something that would kind of maybe change the feel. But that's because I knew to do the due diligence. Now, for a lot of people, they're buying homes maybe across from an empty field or adjacent to an empty field that looks awesome. And there could be plans to build 500 units right next to that, adding, one, the sight lines are going to change dramatically, but two, it adds to the congestion, the traffic pattern, and again, that overall feel. If you like that idea of being across from this open space and that is no longer there, that feel of the neighborhood will change dramatically once that building occurs. So it's important when you're looking at homes online and seeing, maybe pulling up a map and seeing the geography of the area, and you see this big open space, saying, oh, how cool that's going to be to live. It's going to be quieter. Make sure you do your research. Have your real estate agent help you with that. Looking up at the city records, county records, see who owns the property, see if there's any permits that have been pulled or any plans that have been pulled, any surveys that have been done. Sometimes it's a little bit more challenging, but it can be done, and it's something that it should be done to make sure you're buying in an area that's going to be comfortable for you now and into the future. This is happening more and more on the edges of Salem, as Salem is pushing its boundaries and growing more, because more and more people are looking to move to Salem, and they're looking for more housing opportunities. And a lot of times these housing opportunities are going to be multifamily, maybe even mixed use, in areas that you may not even think you would see that in these residential areas. So if you're buying a single family home, you could have this massive multifamily project being built adjacent or next to you. And the thing is, it doesn't even have to be right next to you or across from you or even in your line of sight to affect your daily life after you buy this home. Again, if you're buying that home specifically for that spatial feeling or the views, it absolutely is going to make a huge impact on you right away. But if, let's say, you're buying in a neighborhood and there's a project being built maybe half a mile away, that's still going to impact you on your daily life, your daily commute, just the general congestion, the amount of people that are in the area. It's also going to maybe stress out some of the services if they haven't been planned for correctly. More kids in the schools, that if you have kids that are school-age kids, all these things need to be factored in. And Zillow's not going to tell you this. Redfin's not going to tell you this. Realtor.com's not going to tell you this. Even sometimes driving an area may not necessarily tell the full story. That's when you really got to do your research, especially if you see these large pieces of open land in and around the neighborhoods that you're looking to purchase in. And even when you're doing that research, if you discover that this big vacant land is owned by a local farmer, or it just remains to be a field or something like that, it doesn't mean that things may change. It doesn't mean it's going to stay that way forever. We can't predict the future. Now, it's easy when you find zoning changes or permits pulled or surveys done or plans submitted. That's easy. What's more difficult is buying in an area or across from an area that has this open space. There's no plans, there's no surveys, there's no permits, there's nothing. It doesn't mean it's going to stay that way 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, because at any time they can sell. And I've seen this where, when I moved here, big open land, farm space, there was no records of anything. And then all of a sudden that piece of property went up for sale 3 years later, and now there's a large project being planned for it. So it happens. And so again, we're not predicting the future, but we certainly want to be aware of the possibilities, knowing about the growth of Salem. Because when you're buying a home, you're not just buying in today's neighborhood, you've got to kind of see out into the future a bit. Now we're going on to the next topic here, and this is the big one. This goes beyond identifying the right neighborhood and understanding where your home sits in that neighborhood, understanding maybe the future possibilities of growth in and around the neighborhood. This really goes into, is the home that you're falling in love with online, does that actually feel the same once you get there in person? The Salem you see online isn't necessarily the Salem you're going to experience. Now, when you're looking at photos of homes online, you see 30 to 40 of them. They're showing you what they want you to see. They're painting a pretty picture of a house. they're not showing you what's around the house. The super tall trees that may block your sunlight, the neighbor next door, the neighbor across the street, or what the street looks like in general, or the surrounding areas. It's not showing you whether there are amenities close by or not, and certainly they're not taking you on tours of the full city itself. There's a lot of things that you just don't see from the online photos, the video, or even a floor plan. Those online listings aren't showing you what the traffic is like, the congestion, the traffic patterns, the noise, all sorts of things that really make a big difference in the home that you're buying. It's going to affect your daily life, your daily living, your lifestyle here in Salem, and you just don't get those online. That's why I highly encourage any of the clients that I'm working with to come out here to Salem throughout different seasons if you can, to get a feel for what it's like. And I know that's not feasible for everybody. And in a couple minutes, I'm going to go over what I do for my clients who can't make the trip out here to Salem before buying a home and relocating here. But the reason why it's important for you to come out and really test drive the neighborhood. And what I mean by that is you come see the home and yeah, let's say you fall in love with the house, but now you need to know the little nuances of the neighborhood. And what I always suggest is you start at the house and you work your way out like kind of a circle. First, drive up and down the street, see what that's like. Come at different times of the day so you know what that's like. Different time, the house and living there is like at different times of the day. And go drive around the immediate neighborhood, and then go drive out into some of the main streets and feel what that's like. And then again, you're working your way out, further out, so you can get a better sense of the lifestyle, what it's going to be like living in that particular neighborhood. Now, for a lot of my clients, they don't have the luxuries to come out more than once or even once at all. I've helped clients buy homes sight unseen. Again, I don't recommend that, but if that's the case, this is what I do. I go to these homes and I film them myself, and I show you the pros and the cons. I do a thorough video pointing out the good and the bad of the house. Then I take a tour of the immediate neighborhood. I'm showing you what the neighbors look like to either side of you and across the street, up and down the street. We're going for a ride. I'm showing you what's going on. I'm narrating it, pointing it out. I'm taking you on a little bit of a tour of the neighborhood itself, and then out into the surrounding areas, showing you what nearby amenities are, so you get a better sense of what it's like to live in that particular house. And that gives you so much more than just going online, seeing the amazing edited videos and photos of the house that the listing agents wants to show you. I'm showing you that much more to get a better sense or a better feel. So if you can't come out, you at least have that with you. And if you do come out, you already have certain expectations that are set for you. Now, again, this doesn't replace coming out personally, because nothing will replace that. There is a feel to buying a home. No matter what the specs say, no matter what the floor plan shows, no matter what my videos show, you come out and it's just a feeling. If you've bought a home before, you know what that's like. You walk in and it feels like home. And if you haven't purchased a home, if you're a first-time home buyer, you will experience that when you are looking at houses, whether one feels right for you or not, whether the neighborhood feels right for you. And this goes to Zillow, Realtor.com, Redfin, even the MLS. They can give you all the numbers, they can show you all the data, the specs of the home, but it's not going to tell you or give you a sense of what it feels like to live there. One of the biggest mistakes people make is not buying the wrong house. It's buying the right house in the wrong neighborhood. And not that it's a bad neighborhood, it's just buying in a neighborhood that's not fitting your lifestyle and what you need. And that's why I do these videos. I can relate to you, someone who's relocated here to Salem myself, had lots of questions. There just wasn't a lot of answers or information about Salem, Oregon, especially on YouTube, that really gave me that full picture. So if you're thinking about making that move to Salem, Oregon and buying a house, make sure you reach out to me. Contact information is popping up. I love helping people that are going through a similar situation that my family and I went through when moving to Salem, Oregon, because it's relatable and connectable. So again, reach out, and if you're not quite ready and you're still doing your research, I've got tons of videos on this channel. A couple of them are popping up right now, so make sure you check those out as well.